Hey everyone, this is Zach with Magnum Bikes. Today we're going to unbox the all-new Magnum Scout. Here we have our parts and accessories kit that's equipped with all Magnum bikes. The packaging may differ, but this is the newer style of packaging. Within this is going to be your charger, the derailleur protector, the pedals, and your front headlight. So if we open it up, that is all going to be neatly packaged within here. One other thing it's going to include is your front quick release skewer. So I'm going to sit this off to the side for a moment. And we're going to start stripping the packaging off the bike. This is, for all intents and purposes, as far as the assembly is concerned, the most time-consuming part. Of course, it's important to be mindful that you're not nicking the frame at all with your side cutters, which is the preferred tool I like for cutting the zip ties. And what I do, I just kind of start from front to back. So these two bolts are 4mm Allen bolts. We're going to, of course, use a 4mm Allen wrench and remove those so that we can install our Derailleur Guard. Okay. Now these are the same length, so you don't really have to worry about orientation. So we'll go around and under the shift housing for your rear derailleur like that, so we don't obstruct it this way. So we'll go under and around. We'll start with our top one and then work on the one with the fender attached. So we'll start that one. Don't need to necessarily tighten it all the way yet. Makes it a little easier for this one to go. Okay. All right, so we've got both of those started. And we're just going to thread them in now. This again just protects the derailleur from impacts and your hanger. It preserves shifting performance. So I do recommend installing it. There we go. Shift housing is outside and not obstructed for smooth shifting. And there we go. All right, everyone, next we're going to install the handlebars on the stem. I'm going to step us to the side here. And the tool you're going to need for this is any kind of 4mm Allen wrench. And we're going to loosen all four of those in a star pattern, just so we don't stress any individual bolt. Just take your time here. They tend to have quite a few threads. It's an M5 thread pitch. Then you can just use your fingers once you get a good amount of that bolt head exposed. Now what I'm going to do is set the faceplate of the stem to the side for just a moment. And I'm going to show you something that's going to make your life a little easier when installing the handlebars. All right, everyone, so we're going to go ahead and install our handlebars now. What I've done to make the installation easier is loosen the display and the display bracket, just to get that out of the way while we install the bolts that hold the handlebars onto our stem. Here, we have a 3mm bolt. We want to tighten that up once you find a nice position for yourself or the rider in question. And here, we have a 2.5mm bolt to adjust the 4.5 of the whole display. So we're going to keep those loose for now. We're going to go ahead and line up these hash marks with the center of the stem. And this exactly is why we keep it loose, so I can move that out of the way. So we'll do that. Now from there, we'll again take our faceplate with 4mm bolts, install that into the stem, take our 4mm wrench, and we'll start tightening these bolts again in a star pattern so that it distributes the force and doesn't stress any one bolt at a time. And while we're tightening these, look at those hash marks through the little window of your faceplate and continue to align them. Just makes things easier for you. These bolts do have a pretty good amount of thread, so this takes a little time, but it's important to be methodical with your pattern. One more quick little adjustment. before we really tighten things down. There we go. I'm happy with that. And now we're really getting somewhere. Now we want to drive these all the way home, and you should tighten them pretty tight. They have a torque spec, to get technical with you, of about 6 Newton meters. That's fairly tight. We don't want these slipping on the rider. See, I'm kind of leaning into it a little. All right, there we go. And now we'll adjust that display and tighten it up again with our 2.5 and 3 millimeter wrenches. So I've got my 2.5 here for the bolts on the bottom that aren't directly attached to the display, but to the handlebars. And we're gonna snug those up in the desired position. All right, so another quick tip when installing the pedals is we always want to install a little bit of grease to the threads of the pedal. That's just going to prevent seizing in the future. Here I have Park Tools Poly Lube. You can use marine grease, any kind of bearing grease that you've got laying around at home or available at your local hardware store. So we're just going to put less than a pea-sized amount, really. Don't need much on each of your threads. Stash my grease here. And just go ahead with your finger, kind of spread that around so it gets a nice coat. Okay, there we go. And again, our pedals are opposite threads. So the right-hand thread on your right pedal is going to have a right-hand thread. In other words, a clockwise thread, and that's going to thread in normally. So I'll show that here. Go ahead and position the pedal about as flush as you can and back pedal. And from there, the pedal will pretty much self-align and it'll start threading itself into your crank arm. If you feel any resistance, go ahead and stop, back up, and start over. And again, we'll do the same for the left pedal. Felt a little resistance, so we're going to stop, back up, and start over. There we go, nice and smooth. And go ahead and drive that all the way home as much as you can with your fingers. And then what we're going to use is either a 15 millimeter box open end wrench like this, or a more specific bike pedal wrench, which also has a 15 millimeter span. And what we're going to do is back pedal on either pedal. Grab the flange there, again that's a 15 millimeter flange, and we're just going to push down with quite a bit of force. We don't want these pedals on threading. There we go. We're going to do the same for the left hand side. Okay, now from here, the last part of the assembly is going to be installing the fender as well as your front wheel. So with our headlight that is included in our parts kit again, we are going to take the 5 millimeter bolt and washer that comes stock on your brake bridge here. We're going to go ahead and install that. Now we're going to let that kind of dangle there, and I'm going to take the lip of the fender here, guide it under that brake bridge there, start taking hold of that light again, line it up, and if need be, you might have to bend it into place a little, but that's all right. And we're going to go ahead and install the reciprocal washer and nut that came with that same bolt. And we'll hand tighten that. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is install the legs of the fender on our clips down here. This is going to use a 4 millimeter bolt and an 8 millimeter nut, again with washers on either side. We'll go ahead and push that through. And these can be just a little finicky, so just take your time with those. And go ahead and align everything there. There we go. And then go ahead and assemble again that 8 millimeter nut and washer. And install that again, just hand tight on the other side. And we'll go ahead and do the same thing on the bike's right hand side, or the drive side. There we go. Now these are nylon nuts, so once you get them good and tight, the risk of them loosening is very small. Shouldn't really have to worry about that too terribly much. And what I do is go ahead and level those out at the bottom there. Just kind of eyeball them for now. And with a 4mm Allen wrench and an 8mm opened end box wrench, we can go ahead and finish tightening those up all the way. I'll even use my leg there to kind of hold the fork leg still so that I don't have a bunch of dancing around going on. There we go. We'll put those away. And then again, this is a 5mm bolt and a 10mm nut on your brake bridge, that part of your assembly. And so we're gonna position that fender as tucked into that brake bridge as we can for max tire clearance. We're gonna shimmy that 10mm open end wrench to the back, the 5mm to the front, and we're gonna go ahead and snug it up. Be mindful that that washer doesn't slip behind your front lights bracket. It can do that and it makes it a little tricky to get all the way tight. What I'm gonna do is get this pretty tight, and then I'm actually gonna take the light and slide it back up. There we go. Might even back that off a little so I can get a little more action on that. There we go. All right, there we go. About as tucked into there as you can. And we'll just finish tightening that up. There we go. Double check for our alignment. Align by hand. We want that light facing just slightly down so it illuminates the road in front of the rider while still being able to flash into drivers' and pedestrians' eyes. Now, last thing about that light is we want to make sure we plug it in. And so it's a standard 2-pin with an aligner on there. There's one little tab that shows you exactly where to put it. And again, just go easy here. There we go. We'll get that fully seated. And what we'll do with all this slack is we'll fold up this wire, your light wire, just like that into the main harness here. And we'll use a zip tie to tidy that up just so it doesn't get caught on anything. But before we do that, let's show you how the front wheel gets installed. All right, so we're gonna take our wheel and we have our quick release skewer. I'm gonna set this down to illustrate the orientation of the skewer and the springs here. So we have our cam that tightens the skewer onto your fork dropouts. So the orientation there is going to go cam, cam washer, one axle spring. If you look at it like an arrow, should point in. This one on the opposite side should also point in. And then we effectively have the nut. So we'll take that off, including that spring. We're going to install the cam side of your quick release skewer on the rotor side of the wheel, your non-drive side. So we'll slide that through. And again, make sure on the right-hand side that spring is facing in. Position that. And just start this quick release nut. If you tighten it too much, you won't be able to get it into the fork. So we'll move my stool out of the way here. Go nice and easy. Make sure that disc brake rotor is aligning with your brake pads. It takes just a second. There we go, firmly seated. And then we're gonna wind that cam so it gets nice and tight. Not like a wing nut, but you want it tight enough to where when you actuate that cam, it snugs that quick release up. For reference, you want to start feeling resistance on that cam switch about halfway through its travel, and then just line it up with your fork leg. All right, everyone, that concludes the assembly on the all-new Magnum Scout.